Not right. Yeah, so you cannot understand an individual's mental illness or mental problems if you are not able to understand exactly what causes that situation around. So this is where you look at it from three sides: an individual condition, the environment, and also the actual situation in which this is there. And this is what prompted the issue of what we call psychosocial approach to counseling. And most people, if you go out in the field, they'll tell you that I'm providing psychosocial support, right? What is psychosocial support? How can you provide psychosocial support, for instance? Psychosocial support will probably be how you guide an individual to adjust to, one, his situation, two, his environment, and also his behavior or his mental status. So Erickson here takes us through some of the stages of psychosocial development and argues that psychosocial development actually is a relationship between your mental being and your emotional well-being, right? So I think last time, if I remember so well, when we were doing our casework, we looked at what an emotion is, right? Am I right? No, yes. Yes. Okay. Emotions, attitudes, and motives, right? Motivations and things like those. We did look at this. So I find that you cannot understand an individual without actually understanding the relationship between his mental being and the emotions, right? And the mental being of an individual and the emotions sometimes are the ones which lead to certain types of behaviors. Okay, so if you look at our lady Mary Richmond, I mean, we call her the mother of casework because she was the first individual to try to understand individual mental health issues by trying to understand the biological as well as psychological being of an individual. And here, this was the beginning of how we look at the social work as a science, where we're trying to understand the behavior of an individual and also trying to understand the relationship between the behavior of an individual and the environment in which that individual is in. And she did bring out all those issues of diagnosis, that if you want to understand an individual service user, or if you want to understand the situation in which an individual is in, you need to conduct your diagnosis where you are trying to find out the ability of that individual to function. And I think when we look at the issues of casework or social work, whatever it is, we always oscillate between functionality and dysfunctionality of an individual, and how that also does affect an individual's emotions, how that affects also an individual's mental wellness. And here, she did also allude to the fact that an environment in which an individual is in can also create the situation where an individual may actually dysfunction. So psychosocial, we're looking at the social part of an individual relationship with others, what we call the social capital, and also how an individual functions in that particular community in which that individual is in. So you can see how these relationships will come in. And because of those, you will okay. So here, our psychosocial approaches basically deal with how we understand the diverse social psychology of the individual. Quite very, very diverse. The social psychology of the individual and also how that impacts his own life and things around him. It helps us to understand what we call social patterns within the individual and how these affect that individual's personality. When we talk about the social patterns, we're talking about one-on-one relationships, for example, right? We talked about issues of the social capital, and we said social capital is what? Boston. Don't it does? Social capital? Mm-hmm. That's... Tom will help you. She's here, close to you. right? And tell your neighbor behind you. It's the social networks that you build around yourself. Why do you think social capital is important to an individual in a community or in society? Anybody? No, speak up. Everybody needs to. Okay? Isabel wants to help you. That's a good one. It just gives you the social support around you, right? So the networks around you can give you that type of social support. And by implication, if you have a social support around you, it means you are at peace, right? In the event of anything happening, whatever it is, you find yourself being supported by the networks that you have around. You can have a very simple example. The example of Marilo, right? You can see when we talk about social capital, what happens when somebody is bereaved and something like that, right? You find that people will come together, right, and support you in the processes up to the end. And sometimes even if you don't even have the money, is it possible if you have a funeral and you have no money, but everything to go on where does the money come from? Okay, now that's another issue which is quite controversial now. We're trying to investigate that. Why is that Mariro and Viriza would attract a lot of people and a lot of resources from people, some of whom never even gave you a tentabara when you asked for it? Is it sympathy? Is it empathy? Is it belongingness? What is it? Is it sympathy? Not empathy. Okay, all right. So you can see when we talk about issues of the social capital, that's what it is. And it brings the peace of mind. And when an individual has a peace of mind, it means your emotions too are regulated by implication, right? And therefore you tend to function in a manner that is functional. Now, you tend to function in a manner that is well for your own health. Now, how about if you just give a simple example? I think wherever we come from, there are some people who don't want to belong to that community. They want to live their own life on their own and things like those, right? I've seen some people like that. What happens if something happens to them? Hmm? Okay. How? Well, that's quite a complicated issue. But another form of very strong social capital is belonging to a religious whatever it is, something like that, right? They all come to you because you belong to that organization, and therefore they will be coming there as part of support to you as members of that type of organization. So you can see that problems that may occur in one's social functioning are what we always call the psychosocial dysfunction, right? So it will be this psychosocial dysfunction, and this leads to what we call the psychosocial morbidity, which basically is about the lack of development of the self. So, yes, what is the problem? Oh, you want to see yourself there? Oh, you can go there. So, yeah. So issues of self-awareness. You see, in psychology, whichever branch of psychology is, self-awareness is your individual being, how you are as an individual, how you can manage yourself, and how you can also manage your own emotions by what we refer to as your rather emotional regulation. So self-awareness can be actually accompanied by so many other things. Would be actually cognitive. Are you aware of your strengths and weaknesses in terms of how you understand things, how you interpret things, right? And are you able to understand your own emotions, for example? Are you at the slightest occurrence able to collapse? That's a simple thing like that. or you're able to manage yourself and things like those. All right, let's just look at this quickly because we're going to go back to what psychotherapy is once we're through this one here. But let's just look at the differences between counseling and the psychotherapy. I think we stopped somewhere around here, if I remember very well, right? Yes. So if you look at counseling and psychotherapy, these are some of the distinctive differences that separates the two. But basically, you find that they go hand in hand. Number one, when we talk about counseling, we're talking about prevention of an occurrence, right? Or also prevention as it occurs or pending or about to occur. Is that clear? Do you prevent something which has occurred? No. No. Why? So,
but you can just reduce or prevent.
What it means here is not preventing it to occur. It's preventing the breakdown of an individual who has been affected also, right? So can you apply, sometimes you provide counseling, not because of a pending issue, but because of something which has occurred. Now you're trying to prevent the breakdown of that individual because of the stress that may accompany that condition of that particular individual. And here, it looks at the issues of how you solve your problem before and after, right? Okay, can you go for counseling because of a marital problem in the home? Yes, but when you are going for counseling with your marital problem in the home, would it have occurred or not? It has already occurred, but you are going for counseling because you want to solve that problem and bring back your functionality as a family in the home. Can you go for counseling when you have divorced?
Yes.
Why? You have divorced?
Yes.
Bring us somewhere, you are somewhere. So why would you go to seek counseling services in that situation?
You want to understand the life after divorce. You want how you can continue staying on.
Right. So you will be looking at how you can adjust, you can modify your life to accept that the woman walked on you. Yeah. Yes. Either because you are incompetent in supporting her, or because your behaviors were not congruent to what she expects of you as a husband. Of course, naturally, when you are floating around, you can't know how each individual behaves, right? It takes a long time to do that, to get yours. Seriously, there's always confusion. Ask anybody who has been married before. I hope some of you are married already, so you understand what it is. Yes. Yeah. A simple example. The first day or second day or first week that you are together, how do you know that your husband eats meat and I will eat that or not? And when you are cooking in the kitchen, how do you know you're a woman in the kitchen, right? Cooking. How will you know the size of the meal of the husband and it's your first day to cook for him?
So what were they doing?
The courtship, doing courtship, you go to KFC, you go to all sorts of things, just cheating yourselves like that. Uh-huh. So, okay, so let's assume no, you bring three of those. No, okay. You bring three big lumps, right? In your mind, you say, and start very worried. So, and yes, judgment, right? And the husband too would be worried. If I finish three, if I finish all the three, you just say, a cheat. See, you get? Yes. So both of you will be in a state of uncertainty about what is supposed to be. And your behavior that time starts to be built around those issues, right? Yes. And some of the marital issues that you have come across when you are dealing with some of the people is that where people hide their real behavior, right? when they are just new to one another. Something like that, right? Daily kucharge, can't touch even a single beer, no this and that every day. But nature is nature. After 3 weeks, he comes back after midnight, starts now wondering, why? You see, so all these things around will come around. And therefore, you find that issues of counseling can also look at all these things around. How do you adjust your behavior before and after you find yourself accompanied by somebody? Don't forget, you meet as two strangers, right? From different homes, backgrounds, and culture, upbringing, and whatever, all sorts of things. You know? And that's why people say sometimes you find yourself getting married to a teacher. So if your husband is a teacher, you find that the wife will be treated like a student, so you'll be acting like a headmaster. Yeah, and vice versa, with a lot of instructions, right? Because he's used to his teaching, and so just instructions. That you can do 12 o'clock, just like that. All right, so let's see. So again, some of the techniques that we use here is about how you can bring in about the emotional support, right, to individuals. That's what Eric said. After divorce, there'll be a lot of emotions around you because you're trying to really find out and figure out what is my failure, where did I fail, what did not work right, right? Things like those. And that's why you need somebody's counsel to give you or to ensure that you get some emotional support. And also, it's just about how you build your self-awareness to be able to manage your emotions through what we call emotional regulation. Also, somebody may explain your problem better if you explain that situation to that individual. So this is how counseling would do. Sometimes just to reassure you. We talked about guidance, you remember? Can give you guidance and also can educate you on how best you can do certain things. Now, psychotherapy, on the other hand, is a bit curative, right? It is not. Yes. Okay. And sometimes these small things become very important. You start remembering. But as I think you mentioned. Yes. Let's go on.
On counseling, say that uses different techniques.
Yeah.
Would you mind giving us examples of techniques which can be used now?
Yes. Providing emotional support, just to encourage somebody. Explain to somebody to understand his situation. And if the situation is normal, how do you encourage that individual to accept? You remember acceptance? Can an individual accept his position? Can an individual manage his emotions in the context of the situation in which that individual is in? Reassurance. Can you reassure somebody? Things like those. That's some things that you can do. But when you go deeper into this, it's not just about reassurance or whatever it is. That's where issues of psychotherapy also will come in, right? And we're going to look at those things. Counseling too, just like psychotherapy, there are things that you use, the theories and all sorts of things. That's why you get the techniques that you can use. We'll be covering those things when we come back in our second part of the semester. The second part of the semester will purely be all theories up to the end almost. And also we shall do some sort of presentations or some field assignment for you to do, and you come and present and see what you are going to do. You see how you can do that. Because techniques are built through skills, how you use it, you develop your skills, right? You have the knowledge, but can you use the skills? Can you build the skills to be able to do that? So we shall do this again when we look at the Malay context of how do we do our counseling and our therapy around. So let's look at this one here. So as I said, look, one of the major differences here is one is preventive, right? The other one is curative. That's the difference. This is a major difference. The other tries to prevent, while psychotherapy tries to cure. And here, it focuses on treatment of the problem. Focuses on the treatment of the problem. And what it means here is that in psychotherapy, basically, we shall see as we proceed, you really deal with an interpretation. You must understand the situation and try to interpret that situation so that you are able to help your service user. It involves quite a lot of problem analysis. In psychotherapy, unlike in counseling where you are trying to prevent, this is pure curative. You have to cure that problem, right? For example, somebody has a problem of drug addiction, for example, right? You cannot just talk. You have to go real down to understand, interpret, analyze, and treat. So it is a process which is much longer and also quite involving. You have to use a lot of techniques to be able to understand and support that particular individual. And also psychotherapy in most cases looks at the issues of how you can modify an individual's behavior, right? If you're a drug addict, is addiction a behavioral issue or psychological issue or biological issue? If you're addicted, is it biological? What is it? Is it psychological? Eh? Psychological. Why? Why? When we look at psychology and its definition, we said psychology is about what? Yes. I can't see. Yeah. With mind. Huh? I thought you were saying money. I said, that's your mind. If it is money, it must be your mind with your bucket every day. Okay. But we're talking about an individual's mind processes, right? That's what we're talking about. So individual's mind processes are the ones which generate the type of behavior of that particular individual. That's what it is. So you find that when you're dealing with an individual, for example, with behavior, with addiction, drug addiction, it will be an issue of his behavior created by his own mind. It's a issue of it's a feeling issue, right? How he feels about it and all sorts of things. So how can you pattern an individual's behavior by looking or addressing his thought processes to move this positive and negative thought processes, or to build the positive part so that an individual is aware of his identity and is able actually to live according to the dictates of what his life is supposed to be. That's what is all about the psychotherapy here. All right. Brain, you remember, said, these were very small things, but they become very big one day, this one. Okay. This is how it does here. Self-awareness and helps us in building our self-esteem. That's what it does very, very quickly. And you can see it's about behavioral modification that I just mentioned around here. It tries to enhance our own self-awareness and also how we can build our own self-esteem. What is self-esteem? Is it here? Yes, because it's taking a picture of that, you can tell us what is self-esteem. Self-esteem is ability to do something. Okay. Anybody else? So how is self-esteem different from self-awareness?
Awareness is about how you best know yourself and strength and weaknesses. So while our self-esteem is the confidence and ability you have.
Okay, right, that's it. Self-esteem is how you present yourself in your own mind about your capabilities to do what you think you can do and something like that. And here it's clear. Self-awareness is just your ability as an individual to understand your own conscious thoughts, the feelings about yourself, your identity, who you are and what you can do. And here you are looking at the capacity for one to assess himself or herself, and also to be able to recognize those strengths that you have, or even the weaknesses. Now, a simple question. Is it possible for an individual to identify his or her own weaknesses? Yes. How? How would you identify your own weaknesses?
knows his own problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he also is aware of his weakness.
Person can be aware of his or her through self-reflection.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's interesting. So, do you think as an individual you can know your strengths and weaknesses based on some benchmarks? Is it through benchmarks that you compare yourself against something else?
That's another way.
Okay, it's another way.
Yeah.
So you can say, I think William is stronger than Eric in your own mind, right? But how do you know that?
Physically, you can see.
No, somebody physically does not do that. No, that's not the issue. Haven't you seen some very physically fit people being very weak? They can't even lift a stone, right?
That's a disease.
Yeah, but if we go down to look at issues from the psychological viewpoint, you remember we looked at the issue of the perception, right, and the impressions. Perceptions are your individual judgment about a situation, right? Subjectivity that you build about something, and naturally your perceptions are based on something. You remember I mentioned some time ago that when two individuals meet, there's some real natural, personal, or natural phenomena where you assess an individual based on how you just look at him, right? It's possible, but sometimes it can be wrong. So you find that you weigh yourself against an individual and see what you can do. So you build a picture of how you understand that particular individual, and that gives you an impression. Eric, you cannot just stand up, wake up, and stop everybody. Say, Mulibwanji, Brina, Limakufuna. No. In your mind, you have judged. If I do, the chances of saying yes or whatever it is 90% or zero. So you don't just have to do that. Yeah, it's possible. So issues of perceptions and impressions also are part of our mind processes, right? They help us to understand ourselves, and that's why the issue of self-awareness comes in. That's why the issue of your own self-esteem also can be looked into or can be measured. And these, in most cases, will be benchmarked against such something, right? And you find that issues of emotions or whatever it is, all those things around also revolve around our own mind and how that mind works. For example, you can go to a wedding of your friend, right? Let's assume that individual has 3, 4 friends, right? The 4 friends going to that particular wedding will have very different interpretations of what happened at that wedding. True or false? It's true. Somebody say, oh, could Gilbert amatifuta ndi mkazi ndi amene ujaso. Something like that. See your shit. Yeah. Or somebody be talking about, oh, Singakali kubega tayo say, kango dipasa karandasi basi. See your shit. So you find that each one of you have your own interpretations, and this is what the minds can do. This is what you do. Your mind will benchmark certain things based on what you think your impressions of what happened are. And this will be your subjectivity, as mentioned earlier on, being your own perceptions about that situation. So this will help us to understand ourselves and also can help us to understand another person or another individual. All right. So awareness could be behavioral in nature, or it could be thought related. It could be a relationship issue, and sometimes it could actually be personality. Okay. And a day ago, just an example, I think, was it Friday, Thursday, something happened which I can't understand. What I'm trying to understand what it would be. There's somebody I know who had a wedding on Saturday in Kasungu. Was in Lilongwe here, but the family is in. No, he lives in Lilongwe. He comes from Lilongwe, but the wife lives in Kasungu, they're in Kasungu. On the day of the wedding, on a Saturday, just 2-3 days ago, the younger sister to the wife-to-be committed suicide on the morning of the wedding. Right? What could it be? The older sister is getting married. Before they go even to church, the younger sister commits suicide. It's a real occurrence. It's a thing. It's real, actually. What could it be the situation behind that? Huh? Amata? Amakaniza? It's a wedding. Why? It's just a younger sister.
Maybe the younger sister had an intimacy with the in-law to be brother-in-law.
So you can see how you can interpret certain occurrences, right? I was thinking like Eric, it's possible he may have started with the younger sister. Then now that use a word which is not very good. He migrated from younger sister to yeah. So these are just now because the other one is gone, it means there'll be a lot of stories, right? People will be creating their own theories about what actually happened. Or were the sisters so close that the other one felt so disappointed that the other one is moving out? So you can get a lot of these theories around, it's possible. And I was trying to check yesterday, what happened? Say, no, they just locked the dead body, proceeded with the wedding. What would you have done yourself?
It's okay. How are you going to do?
Okay. Yeah, so that's what they decided to do. You rocked the body and proceeded with the wedding. But the question is, how were they feeling? The parents of that and the sister and everybody. It must have been a very painful experience, right? That can lead to stress, and naturally the sister, the surviving sister may go into depression for a long time. Because she will not be able to understand why the sister decided to do that, right? So you can see how when we talk about issues like this, these are mind issues, right? And for somebody to get to a point where that individual is committing suicide, it means he must have gone through a lot of trouble, anxiety, and all sorts of things, right? Except that he was not able to mention what he's supposed to be. So this is how we look at these things here. Now, so here, psychotherapy is best for addressing the mental conditions, mental health conditions of individuals, things like anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. You can see. So I find that actually suicidal thoughts are mental health condition issues, right? It means the individual is not able to control the emotion or was so much stressed up that he could not even afford to manage to control the situation. And naturally this is, you remember I talked about positive and negative thoughts, right? There was much more attracted, maybe the impulses pushed her much more towards negative thoughts. And that's why she was able to take up that decision to commit suicide. So this is what actually can happen. Now, here again, the issue of psychotherapy helps us to understand and also how we can manage our own thoughts and feelings, and also how we can handle the behaviors around ourselves or around the environment in which we are. The issues that happen to an individual that can actually be created by the environment in which you are. It's possible. Haven't you heard of people somewhere? Mukundida pamuzi pano ndisamuka. See, something like that, eh? Yeah, things like those. Kundipa bamuzibano ndizipa. Haven't you heard about those things? Yes, these are real issues of the mind and how an individual can be affected by the environment around. So if the environment is quite volatile and inimical to an individual's functioning, an individual may get down to depressions and also develop some suicidal thoughts around. So here, we use that therapy to help us manage our thoughts. So thoughts basically is about how you deal with your processes of your mind and also how you can break those things into what we call negative and positive. Haven't we covered this one? Negative and positive thoughts? No. Yes, earlier on, yes. So what are they and how you deal with them? Because they have an implication actually on the type of action an individual can take. So suicide is an action, right? An individual takes, and that will be generated through the mind of an individual and also strengthened by the negativity of his thought processes. And here, there are a lot of issues involved in our thoughts that require management. For example, the emotions, the impulses, and also how you manipulate the environment in which you are. All these things can create those stresses in an individual. Oh, it is up now. This cannot be the end, I doubt. Okay. Any question, please, before we proceed? No question before we proceed? Eric, any comment before we proceed? No comment, no question. Okay. Okay. Look at this. Look at this. Yeah, so just as to look at this, this is what we have looked at, and this is what psychotherapy would do. Just down there. What I want to do is I want to now to go to psychotherapy as it were and see what we'll get out of this. Let's see, move quickly to that. And I think your examination will be is within what we have covered in between when we started and now. Let's see if this one works out right. Okay, now I just want to unpack what psychotherapy is. I know we have started from somewhere we are, but what is it? That's what I'm saying. Do we really know where it comes from, what it is supposed to be? Just to give you a glimpse of what it is supposed to be. Yes, this is what psychotherapy is all about. It's a technique which is used to deal with human emotions, I've already mentioned, arising from different conditions. And you see, it's an old technique which has been there for quite a long time, around mid-19th century. There's a gentleman called Dundee, and I think he must have been Greek or whatever it is, but he's trying to tell us that this term psychotherapy actually is Greek, a derivative. Says this is a technique which was used by physicians to influence mental states of individuals. So psychotherapy is how you influence the mental state of an individual. Now the question is, can you use it to influence a physical state of an individual? Yes or no? Can psychotherapy be used to help the physical being of an individual? No or yes? If this question came, how do you do it? We shall see as we proceed. Yes. Why no? Mm-hmm. Mind. Mm-hmm. Okay. So psychotherapy cannot use on physical things. Okay. Does physical things affect an individual's mind? Yes or no? So why no? Yeah, that is it. So as we proceed, you'll see actually what it is. Because in most cases, actually, the greater part of issues of people with physical challenges, right, have their minds sometimes in a way that we have seen. Right? And how normally, whatever it is, right? The way they behave is quite different from what we would expect somebody to behave. Never say how a normal people be. There's no normal person. That I have always mentioned. None of you is normal, including myself. Isabella, do you think you are normal? Why? Some? Okay. Maybe Taonga can tell us. Are you normal? You're normal? Yes.
If you met people, they don't know that they are mad. So how sure are we?
Huh?
If you met people, they don't know that they are mad.
Mm-hmm.
So how sure are we that we are not?
That's what I'm saying, that it's impossible. It cannot be normal. Every person has 1% madness. Yes. Every person has 1% madness in his mind. So if it goes beyond one, and maybe beyond a certain degree, that's why you have a psychiatric issue with regards to homicide or something like that. But all of us have at least 1%. 1%. You get angry, you hate, you do what? Those are not the normal way of how you did function. So that is it. So here, we're looking at it as how you can deal with the issues of the mental state of an individual so that that individual can actually address various ailments, right? Anger in excess becomes an ailment, right? Yes. For no apparent reason, you are in your own home, you become so angry and you break everything in your own house. It happens, eh? Have you seen people do that? Or have heard about it? Yes. Who's on screen, something like that. Okay? Yes, but in the following morning, you start repressing and wondering why you did those things. That's an ailment. Something is wrong. I know of somebody who his wife, because went out to drink and went home around 8 o'clock in the evening. The wife was very angry. He just took an axe and crashed the car all over everything. It's an axe. You see? So all those things are ailments. That's an anger which cannot be controlled. No? So this is how we're looking at it. So out of these discourses, Sigmund Freud, we all know, is just the father of our psychotherapy. This is an individual who understood the human person, and also I think we have looked at all these things. And he also is one who developed this theory, okay, psychoanalysis, which I think we have looked at it, and also we'll be looking at it from a different perspective as we proceed, how it does and how it does affect an individual. And psychoanalysis actually became the first form of psychotherapy. So this is how you'd, yes, you can help us laugh with you. Which one? Freud. Not Freud, Freud. Actually, it's Fred. No, it's just like that. Freud. Freud. Sigmund Freud. But it's Sigmund Freud? No, Freud. Freud. No. But could have been a Fred. Who knows? Right? Hmm? Yeah, but you find that those are the Central Europe names. Austria, Germany, Slovakia, and all sorts of things there. So this is the gentleman who put these things into the works of what we call psychotherapy now. So you can see it is actually, as I said, it's a Greek derivative. The psyche referring to the spirit, the soul, or the breath, something like that. It says soul issue, spirit. And we talk about those are mind issues, right? Talk about the spirit. Where's the spirit? Talk about the spirit of Jesus, the spirit of Muhammad as well. I hope Muhammad also had the spirit. So all these things. What is the spirit? Kaya. Okay. So these are the things. And the therapia, which is therapy, is a healing or any medical treatment that you provide. That's the therapy. Now comes the issue of psych, right? Which actually refer to the treatment by hypnosis. And we shall see what is this thing called hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state in which you try to induce into individual the consciousness that is not available, right? People who believe in prophets, I don't know, how many of you believe in prophets? Okay. They use quite a lot of this technique, unknowingly, of course. They don't know they're using this technique, where they do hypnotize people's minds, right? You find that okay, your mind starts somewhere, it doesn't start to think. You go in an unconscious state, right? That's why people fall. They're so confused. Your mind starts wondering what is happening. You find yourself, you are down. Something like that. And you can't explain after that why. Something like that. Right? So you can see. So here, it means an individual's mind sometimes gets into the unconscious state. And for an individual to come to think, realize that that individual has a problem, you have to use that type of technique to try to induce the consciousness into an individual to understand what is happening. But the reverse of it is to make sure somebody that's actually shuts his consciousness, and so people start believing. Really? The prophet just talks and talks, starts crying. How? Right? You're crying, this is capacity and so forth. No, something like that. You know? And I think I've watched some prophet in Uganda called Kankanda, something like that. Yes, it's Kankanda or whatever. Now, that guy literally tells people, when you come here, dress properly. See your chat? Yes. So just by telling you dress properly, because your mind is set to go and fall down. That's what this does. Just does that. Because when you come here, I pray for you, you fall down. So your mind just read. Even it just talks about one small thing, your mind says just fall down, then you fall down. It's quite interesting. I wish you had time I would go there and see if I can fall down. Okay. So here, it is really assumed that individuals afflicted by any mental state lose the power of voluntary actions, right? If you lose the power of your voluntary action, what it means is that something involuntary will come, right? So that falling there is the unconsciousness, which is involuntary. You just find yourself you're down because your mind has been hypnotized and you cannot actually control your own action. So that's what actually happens. And it's very, very easy. In other words, what happens is that you get into a state of what we call the trance. Trance is a situation where you are thinking in a vacuum, something like that, right? You cannot create anything out of your thoughts around. That gives you that unconsciousness of yourself, and you may find yourself doing certain things involuntarily without you knowing what is happening. I used to watch, was this guy who died, the Nigerian guy? Yes, TB Joshua. Not because I believed in those things, but because I want to understand people's minds as he's working there. I was also trying to work with it. You know, he would look at an individual very, very quietly, say, just like that, and the eyes of it is actually trying to kill your thinking, kill your consciousness, something like that. And he says, go, whatever. Your mind is actually dead, you just fall down, something like that. So this is how it is. And so, therefore, you find that in psychotherapy, if we are using this technique, we're trying to bring back that state of an individual to be able to take your actions the way they are supposed to be, right? By using your mind and your mind processes to behave in a manner that is functional. Because in any conscious state, naturally, you are not as functional as you should be. So here, this is what actually happens.
Someone think this thinking vacuum. Thinking in vacuum.
To think in a vacuum.
Yes. How can someone do that?
No, can I reverse your question? Can you stop to think, or can you stop thinking?
No, you can't.
You can't.
You can stop thinking. How? You can't, right?
Are you thinking now? About what? About the phone? Okay. Yeah. So you can see now. This now shows the difference between the positive and the negative thoughts. He is here, but somewhere else, right? It means his mind is not able to adapt to what he's supposed to do, because the positive thoughts should focus on what we're trying to do. We talked about the autoform, the automatic mind processes, right? That they're just automatic and they just come continuously, whatever. And our consciousness is supposed to control at a particular point to let you focus on what you're supposed to do. And you have seen people who sometimes would be driving, right? Or you have heard about it, or you have experienced it. If you are driving and your mind is somewhere else, the chances that you can make an accident is very high, right? Yes. By the time you think about braking, they have knocked somebody around. So the mind is automatic, the thoughts are automatic, and they are continuous. And in most cases, very unconscious. Until you want to do something which is voluntarily coming from your positivity, then you become conscious. Start using your consciousness to do that. Otherwise, it's not easy. And sometimes there are issues of your unconsciousness being actually driven by your suppressed memories, for example. And this is very, very, very common. There are memories which come on over and over again, which try to disturb your own behavior. I can give you a very simple example. Let's assume a boy was raped at age 12, right? That is a traumatic experience. And the brain will keep that memory and it may suppress it. But it may not suppress it for long. It may come out as what we call the PTSD. I think we've mentioned about PTSD over and over again, right? And will be coming always to haunt that particular individual. And those are the issues that require psychotherapy, where you can deal with that individual to modify the behavior of that individual by addressing the injury that the brain suffered during that action of rape. And there are so many things which can happen out of that. The boy may start behaving in a manner that is injurious. You can injure maybe women, just hate women and start injuring them around something like that, right? Didn't I give you an example of an individual in 19, what would that have been? Let's call it 1983. 83. Early 83. Here's a guy from Baraka who started torching every Catholic church from Baraka to Zomba along the way. In a Catholic church, fire, 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 fire to the end. Right? That's a behavioral issue, right? And I remember, sir. Oh no. You see, so in the end, I think this guy was apprehended, taken to court for arson, and in court, naturally arson is a serious criminal behavior or a serious crime. But the presiding judge that time was not only a friend, but we were neighbors. My office was the other side and the courts and his office the other side. So he came with his, found it to be a very interesting, funny case, right? Here, Mr. Clem, look at this case. This case is about this guy. He has touched all the churches from Baraka to Zomba, but only Catholic churches. These are the churches, no, CCAP, whatever, it is nothing. What is it? You know? I said, no, you see, what this guy requires is look at his behavior, that is all. The criminal mind, I don't think there's any criminal mind in what he did. What he did is a behavioral issue. His head, what is in his head? What he needs to analyze the situation, needs an interview to just find out from him. And indeed, we tried to do that and discovered that this guy actually narrated why he did that, right? So my colleague said, help me to look at this. So that was just in questioning this and that. Says, no, I'm very angry. I'm very, very angry. I said, why? My wife, and we are both Catholics, my wife goes out with the priest at our church. You can see now the story, right? Yeah. So that action, that anger, wife and husband, they are devout Catholics, right? And the Catholic guy is supposed to lead them and give them the glory, goes and eats the fruit that is not his. Right? So that thing now comes in. An individual act. Is that a crime or an induced issue? It is anger, bitterness, the injury, right? In that individual. And he acted to demonstrate that he can do that. And in the end, the judgment by the courts was that he sent him to mental hospital. That's what happened. Those days we didn't have therapies around in Malawi, during Kamuzu Band and all sorts of things and stuff. I could have done it myself, but I was going to have problems of conflict of interest. So I couldn't do that. So you can see, right, how the brain works, right? So the brain can actually be injured by actions of other people, and you start acting in a weird manner because you have been injured, and that is what it is. So in your psychotherapy, you're actually trying to deal with an individual's mind processes, and also how you can try to address those types of things around that individual. Okay, that's it. Okay. Let's see. So hypnosis here, let's just look at what hypnosis is which is also referred to as hypnotherapy, deals with how an individual mind can be put into a state of relaxation. In other words, there's tension in between. And there you are trying to bring that type of relaxation, which can only be done if you try to address the issue of the pressure or the issue of the anxiety of that particular individual. What is this is room 4. Danger, you always greet people. What percent more must go on? Yeah, here we double.